Welcome to the Zero Trust ZTA adoption in the federal government. Big deal. Big deal. We have over 300 folks that were registered for this interagency briefing. And we want to welcome everybody from every agency that decided to show up. Have some wild ones in there. And we really appreciate you joining us today. So we appreciate you coming. Best briefing ever. You're not going to believe this. Joe Norton. It explains the methodology. And that's from Al from HHS, Jerry from RRB, Railroad Retirement Board. Hey, Jerry, help with understanding what ZTA strategy is. What is this thing? Conrad from CMS, I'm introduced to the methodologies and approaches for implementing Zero Trust. Love that. If Seneca, best briefing ever, she could just get in here. How about that? Hopefully she's here. Grant wants free stuff. I don't know about that. I guess we could give something away.
The whole seminar is free.
The whole thing is free. There you go. Free stuff. It starts out with free. Thomas from the FDA, I get something that we can use in our own ZTA. Hopefully that's the case. Charles from Department of Ed, I see an example of how ZTA has actually been implemented. That's a good thing, right? David with EPA, provide more insight on some of the hard requirements of getting to ZTA. Love that. Separating the soft from the hard. All right. So Christopher from the Peace Corps, we get to discuss some of the challenges doing this at agencies with global presence that are not connected to the U.S. Embassy. That's a great question, Christopher, and how we do that. And Kip from the FAA, I understand the timeline for agency implementation. We going to talk about any of that, Joe?
99% of it.
99%. All right. So that 1% that we'll have to come back around and make sure we get that. So please address this. Michael from the VA, current timeline for implementation. Again, timeline. David from EPA, clarify the OMB funding for ZTA and sequencing of M2209 requirements. If core identity and data pillar capabilities haven't achieved. Wow, that's a wild one. How about that one, Joe?
We're going to maybe halfway answer that.
Halfway answer for that one, and kind of in process, I think. So Conrad from CMS again, how are your organizations approaching implementing many requirements, right? Got that one again. Management fit in, how to operationalize the idea of ZTA. Love that. Vonda from State, implementation of Zero Trust, general overview of manpower requirements, right? Manpower is coming into play. To successfully execute, understand costs. There's one for the costs. Martin from the VA, how will ZTA be implemented, the application level or infrastructure level? Love that. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. If not, we'll get to it. Royal from FAA, impact on the users and costs. Love it. And Tim from USGS, many DNS software based on bind do not support the requirements outlined for ZTA. Please advise. So we may get to some of those. Some of those are in the weeds. I'm going to introduce you to Joe Norton. He's a senior fellow of DivIHN's Digital Risk and Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. You can read the rest of all his qualifications down there. And Laszlo Gonc is here. He's going to be helping Joe run through this presentation. He's the first senior fellow with DivIHN's Digital Risk and Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, as well as a bunch of other qualifications that are there, and you can see all those there. Real quick on the session agenda, I already gave you a little bit of the introductions, but we'll talk about DivIHN and what they do and how they've gotten here, and briefing controls and what Zero Trust is and what it's not, the federal mandates on Zero Trust and the agencies and the areas of the agencies that are expected to make progress by 2024. It doesn't seem like that's that far away anymore, does it, gentlemen? Pitfalls and traps are the other things we're going to talk about. Real quick, session docs are going to be dropped in. You have a link that'll go to GovBrief, so you can download all of these, including the presentation, the handouts, and we have a couple of other documents there for your review. Terry is handling that, and that's going to go in the chat. And if you've been living under a rock and you don't know anything about Zoom, can't imagine that's the case, but you are on a Zoom, so you can go up there and click there, and you can do side by side and drag that little thingy in the middle there can make it bigger or smaller, however you like. And participation is really easy. The docs are going to be put into the chat and all the rest of the chat type of things. If you have any questions at all, do me a favor, raise your hand or put it in the Q&A. We have, I don't know how many folks are here. There's over 180 now that are here, and probably more coming in. So raise your hand or put it in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to be able to get to you. And if you want a private dialogue, send it right to that email, which is how do you say your last name, Shantanu? You're unmutified.
Wilker. Yeah.
Go Vilker. Okay, yeah. Very good. So you can send it there, and we'll keep the conversation going. Quick disclaimer for the legal side of GSA: this event is not affiliated or endorsed by GSA or any other agencies, provided to you for informational purposes only, and so you can participate and dialogue. It's voluntary, and it is not an indication, if I could speak, or endorsement or commitment to purchase from any vendor. So we appreciate that. And we will be doing some polls along the way to be able to figure out, let me see if this poll is actually going to work. So why are you here today? I am on the hot seat. That's not the right one, guys. I don't know why that did not update. Anyway, answer this one. And we can talk about your journey on ZTA, but I'm on the hot seat for implementing Zero Trust. I'm trying to get my head around EOs and memos, and I want to be part of the Zero Trust dialogue, or my boss made me come. There's going to be some Weisenheimers there. Let's talk a little bit about DivIHN and how you guys, tell us a little bit about DivIHN. Who wants to take this one? Shantanu, you want to take this one?
Yeah. All right. Thanks. I'll keep it short. So we're first and foremost, thank you all for joining in. It's really exciting to see the energy, and thanks, Dave, for driving that. So we are a Chicago-based IT services and management consulting company. We are SBA 8A certified for federal government. So that's something maybe of interest to you. And as a company, we provide cloud, on-prem, enterprise class solutions, as well as cybersecurity across the entire country, and sometimes a little bit in Canada as well. What you will see in the ensuing section, and even interacting with DivIHN, is the intellectual property-based service model, where we bill less hours by bringing the reusable IP. And without any further ado, I'll give it back to you.
All right, fantastic. We appreciate that. I'm going to end this poll, and just so everybody can see those, but a lot of folks here trying to get their head around EOs, and they want to be part of the Zero Trust dialogue. Really appreciate you guys letting us know about that. And with this, I'm going to introduce you to Laszlo, who's going to take us into the presentation here. Laszlo, Gonc, you can take over, my man.
Oh, thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate it. I have yet to finish half my coffee, so I have to have at least half your energy. I'm going to try. All right, so let's go right into it, Dave. Next slide. Joe, how do we start this conversation with everyone?
Oh, the first way we start the conversation is by sitting back, relaxing, and walking through this in hopefully a pace that makes sense, because there's a lot of information to share with everyone today. The second way is perspective. It's all about perspective. So this is a photo of a bald eagle that I had the opportunity to capture at the Conowingo Dam on the Susquehanna River up in Maryland this, just after or before Thanksgiving. I think it was just before Thanksgiving. And I popped into the deck because I think it gives a perspective of, hey, in this case, you're either the eagle or the fish, and who's going to win here, right? So ZTA is like any other major effort that goes on in the world of business or commerce or government and anything related to IT, where sometimes, we used to say, are you the bug or the windshield, right? Hey, so I don't want to use a car or a dirty windshield as a perspective, so I like this eagle, right? And, the eagle's going to eat that fish, and where you are on this journey is going to be totally up to yourselves and your agencies, right? So perspective, that's what we're here to get on ZTA.
Awesome.
So Joe, no, excellent. Actually, Joe has a whole portfolio on his personal website if anyone's interested. Next slide. Joe, why are we here? Walk us through it.
Well, we're here because we're told to be here, right? So, you go back to May in 2021, an executive order came out of the administration about improving cybersecurity. You guys are well aware of that. And then in September 2021, OMB issued their guidance or their initial guidance or about a draft strategy and circulated it all over federal government about moving towards a zero trust architecture. Okay. Now, number of months go by. We come out in January 19. We have a presidential memorandum, NSM 8, and then OMB quickly followed up with M2209, which we'll talk about each of these just a little bit more detail. And that was in January. Now, here we are in early week of April with this webinar. This is where we are, right? So that's why we're here. You all aware there's lots coming that needs to be done. So let's get into it.
So Joe, what's the executive order all about? Next slide.
So executive order on improving our nation's cybersecurity, which I am happy to see as a veteran and an official old guy, right? And having also worked in the commercial sector and in supporting some of your agencies over the years, I'm very happy to see this, talk about improving cybersecurity at the federal level and at the national level. But we're here, the executive order has 9 specific policy actions in it, right? Foster more secure cybersecurity, remove barriers to threat sharing, enhance software supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. Number 3, modernizing the federal government cybersecurity posture is what we're here about. This is where you will find the direction setting for zero trust architecture.
So Joe, what are the federal agency cybersecurity initiatives?
Let's move the slide. So it focuses on adopting best practices, advancing, and this is interesting language, toward zero trust architecture. And all that language means is it's not like flipping a switch that everybody recognizes around the world and in our federal government that it's going to take a lot of work. Accelerate towards secure cloud services, centralize and streamline access to cybersecurity. This is the sharing of information across agencies. Drive analytics for identifying and managing risk, and investing in technology and personnel to match these goals. Now, this is what I appreciate. Advance towards zero trust and invest in technology. So it says, hey, whether or not we get new funding or old funding or just reprioritize funding to support these initiatives, okay? So implementation planning is specified to be part of your fiscal 22 to 24. Budgeting, your budget estimates should be focused on fiscal 23 and 24 and reprioritizing now your fiscal year 22 funding to achieve some of these goals and get started.
No, so one of the things you're pointing out, Joe, that I really like is that there's an actual investment in technology. They're actually building out the budget around it. So,
well, I'm sure many in the audience will say, so where's the money? So they said, put it into your budget. Let's see where we can go and reprioritize the priorities for your current budgets, right?
So how I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead.
So how do the agencies, so that's good information that you shared with us. It's at a high level. How do the agencies go about then actually achieving zero trust?
So I thought the OMB's guidance from September was quite well thought out, right? Achieve specific zero trust security goals, setting some priorities and expectations. And they fell into the 5 domains of identity, devices, networks, applications, and data. And the primary goals that OMB identified in their guidance for identity was enterprise-wide identity management within each agency and the implementation of MFA, multi-factor authentication. At the device level, either maintain or establish a complete inventory of every device and implement an ability to detect and respond to incidents, security incidents. At the network level, encrypt everything at rest and encrypt in transit. Very interesting. And at the application level, treat every application, whether it's a desktop application, a server-based, in your own data centers, old mainframe apps, as well as cloud-based applications, treat them all from a security perspective as if they are internet connected, and test for external vulnerability and provide reports and share your vulnerability reporting with CISA. And at the data level, provide a pathway to data protection, data categorization, logging, and information sharing, which is basically saying, well, we're not sure how to get there yet, but have a pathway to be able to track and trace all of your data and its movement.
And Joe, isn't really about it's the data. The reason all of this is being done is to protect the data. And much like a CSI, it's following the chain of custody of that data.
Certainly. And it's always about the data. That's where the intellectual property is. That's where all the personal information is. That's where all the personal health information is, et cetera, et cetera. That's where all the classified information is. It's in the data.
So Joe, which agencies are affected by the Zero Trust memo?
You are all affected. That's an easy one. If you got an acronym, put it on the board, you're affected. It's that simple.
All right. Well, in that case, what are the timelines that for implementing Zero Trust by the White House?
And this is what I see as the challenge and where you guys are at, right? Where we all are and how it all affects us. Okay. So every one of us in some way is a user of services from agencies, at least from the civilian side of this. Okay. Especially me, because I'm old enough to start collecting Social Security. So I want to make sure that thing's always secure. Anyway, the directives in the White House January 19 memo specify, okay, who is responsible, what actions must be taken, what must be accomplished, and some due dates. And if you look at some of these due dates, some of them are already passed. Now, all of the directives say make progress, make efforts, how do you get there, have a plan. So it's not saying everything has to be done, but that if it's not done, there must be a plan to be reviewed to say, how do you get there? As you can see, some of these dates are already there. So I have no idea where you guys are. This is your own self-evaluation. Have you submitted adoption plan? Like, so if I go down within 60 days from the January 19th, the agency had submit the ZTA adoption plan to CNSS. 321, did that occur? I have no idea. There was a whole bunch of initial plans and guidance to be done. There are some deadlines that were placed in the directive for April, and then we get into where I think it gets really the rubber hits the road. You go down to the bottom of that list, you start seeing July 19th, 180 days, implement multi-factor authentication, 180 days in the identity area, encryption. Right. So, where are you guys at? I don't know, but we're not here to do a performance review. We're here to talk about ZTA and approaches to help you get there.
All right, let's take a step back. There's a lot out there on Zero Trust. There's a lot of vendors that have their own shoebox solution of what Zero Trust is. Joe, what exactly is Zero Trust?
Well, Zero Trust starts as a concept first and then a philosophy, and how you get there can take many, many different paths, right? But NIST Special Publication 800-2007 defines Zero Trust as a capability to provide least privilege per access request decisions. So if you read the actual text in the NIST publication, it says Zero Trust provides a collection of concepts and ideas designed to minimize uncertainty in enforcing accurate, least privilege per request access decisions in information systems and services in the face of a network viewed as compromised. So it takes an approach that says you have to assume that you're easily compromised, and the only way to protect yourself is to test for least privilege access, not max privilege access, and not massive all-inclusive access rights. But every time you come in, somebody logs in, test, no matter where they're coming from, internet access inside your network, coming into an application, looking to get to a server, get to a database, get to a file, whatever it may be, test the righteousness of someone having the rights for that access, and obviously automate it.
So Joe, I know you're going to go into this a little bit more detail a few slides down, but essentially, if I understand you, what you're saying is we have to validate or authenticate each device for each user, for each device they use, each session that they log on. Is
Yes,
that right?
absolutely.
So, okay, cool. So Joe, if that's what it is, what is zero trust not?
Well, the first thing is, it's not a COTS product. You can't buy it out of the box. It's not a vendor solution by itself. Okay. It's a collection of implementations to allow you to test and manage identity and access controls, right? It's not a solution for zero-day vulnerabilities. It has nothing to do with the other vulnerabilities that come up that can be taken advantage of by bad actors. And cloud adoption certainly is not equal to zero trust. Cloud is cloud. So all suppliers of cloud services on their administrative side have the same requirements to work with your agencies and implement zero trust as a supplier to you. And zero trust by itself will hopefully, I believe in zero trust, absolutely. It will reduce the incidence, okay, of invalid access and loss, creating security incidences. However, if there is a breach, it will not make you recovery ready. Recovery is a completely different ballgame. The idea is to minimize the potential for illegal access, unauthorized access, / breaches.
So you've walked us through what zero trust is and are helping us define it. You're telling us what zero trust is not. Next slide. Where do we start?
As I said earlier, it's all about a philosophy and a culture. You have to think differently. It's about looking at your intentions, your strategic intentions to protect your IT infrastructure and systems, and then embrace a zero trust mindset and philosophy into your design decisions and architectures, and to embed it into your culture from a briefing and a training and an awareness of all your users and all of your suppliers and so on and so forth and subcontractors about why zero trust would be implemented to protect the integrity of your systems and your information.
So if we're changing our mindset, embedding our philosophy and putting that into the fabric of our culture, Joe, what are some of the core principles we can use as we do that?
Well, at all levels, zero trust is an all-encompassing approach to securing devices, application, network, data, and identity access. If you focus at the policy level on identity-centric policy modeling to control your access, okay? The three core principles of zero trust to ensure all resources are accessed securely, regardless of location. Adopting, as I mentioned, the least privilege approach, and strictly enforcing access control. So that means, for example, when you're at your laptop or your desktop or your workshop, your workstation, whatever it may be, and you log into your device, you're logging into your network, you're logging into an application. That means now that zero trust calls for a stringent approach to you log in for your session, and as soon as your session work is over, you're logged out of that access to that application or to that data. And then if you come back an hour later and say, I have to go back to that app, well, you have to re-log in. That's basically what it's saying. And also that you inspect and log all traffic movement.
This is great information that we can just take right away and put into our core principle strategy as we develop it. But CISA is also offering some timeframes. What is that about?
Well, the CISA, DOD and CISA and DHS have been working on how do you get from here to there for a long time. So it's recognized that, we came out with the executive order, you've got the OMB strategy, you've had some further information to help support you. CISA recognizes that it's a long journey in a relatively short period of time. Now, these are my words, long journey in a relatively short period of time. I know that the end goals in all of the directives take you out to the end of fiscal 2024. Okay. On the calendar, it's the end of Q3, right? However, that's a lot to do across the timelines of calendar year 22, 23, and into 24. So it is a long journey, relatively short period of time, and there's lots of help out there for you.
So as part of a security program, we're supposed to have something like a threat catalog that goes with our stuff. What does CISA have to say about hunting?
Well, I wanted to highlight threat hunting under the CISA directives, right? Public Law 116-283, Section 1705. We might as well be accurate. Within the overall strategy, threat hunting activities on the federal, executive agencies, networks without prior authorization for agencies. What this means is that CISA will be conducting threat hunting on your networks. They do not have to, as part of this modernization, they do not have a requirement to inform you beforehand. They will conduct threat hunting and test your networks and provide quarterly reports, not only with your agency, but et cetera, with all the other controlling agencies in our federal government. This is not a punishment. It is to help build trust in our networks and help point out where our weaknesses are.
I think it's time for us to take a break and get some injection of Dave's energy for another poll.
Hey, there we go. So Dave's energy says, what's your biggest challenge with zero trust? That's what Dave's energy says. Is it understanding what it is? We're kind of working through that process right now, meeting the presidential memorandums and executive orders. What's the impact on you as an agency? Well, how about you as your job, right? So what's the impact on you and your job role, or finding resources kind of like this, right, gents, to figure out how do we get through this? And Joe, that was the timeline's a great example of what is what's on a lot of folks' mind of how do they get to it. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. You can pop it in the Q&A. We have a couple in here, or at least one. Is CISA threat hunting intended to augment or replace agency threat hunting? Great question, David.
The answer would be no, but as a supplement too.
As a supplement too. That's fantastic. And Dave was the only one that had that. And I know for a fact that there's other questions. So let me check the chat. Is it about the zero trust maturity model? Chris is asking. I'm not sure what question that is, Chris Han. If you have any, let's do Ravi. Ravi, isn't this already mandated by FITARA? Is there an agency scorecard that's graded periodically? Also, what is the OMB memo that lays out zero trust? Isn't it already required by OMB at M1902? That was pretty good, Ravi.
Yeah, it is. But all of the fit and other, things and guidance that you have still exists. So those questions came up the last time we gave this, and I've got some information at the back end of the webinar on that.
Awesome. So we'll get to some of those things, and I'm not sure what you're asking, Chris, about the zero trust maturity model. Is it about the zero trust maturity model? I'm not sure what that is.
Well, actually, we're going to get to a little bit of that on some upcoming slides on the maturity model.
Okay. Here it is. Chris is clarifying. Is the ZTA core principle come from CISA's zero trust maturity model?
Yes.
The answer
it's starting with DOD, adopted and reviewed by CISA, and together we'll put some slides up on the reference architecture.
Yep. Coming up, Chris. We got you covered. All right. I think that does it for the. He says, thanks. You're welcome, man. I got one more real quick from Dan. This is not a real quick. Daniel. We're a software vendor with a cloud solution based on zero trust architecture on Azure, but we present this to IT people in both government and large private enterprise. They seem not interested in zero trust Instead, they send us their 100 question security form asking us whether our data center has sensors on doors or whether our computers have USB ports. How do we best bring zero trust to their attention? Things just like this, Daniel.
Yeah, it
Answer
is.
that question.
There's a lot to go. I mean, part of the modernization overall points of movement going forward. Well, today we're talking about zero trust. Within the modernization executive order is directives for OMB, et cetera, and GSA to modernize along the way to include all of this.
So, and it's really an education, just dialogue like this and continuing the process of dialoguing together, because the timelines are tight, right, guys?
Oh yeah. So with the guidance from OMB, with the directives in the executive order for the GSA, et cetera, it all pushes everything towards modernizing along the way to adopt the modernization philosophy, which will eventually update all of those questionnaires on security and fit for software products, et cetera.
Yep. And Linda's saying zero trust requires agencies to encrypt all HTTP traffic, including within their environments. Good comment there, Linda.
Yep.
All right, Laszlo.
Yeah, let's jump right back to it. But go ahead and share the poll results and let's see what came out ahead, Dave.
I will do that. Share results is finding resources, baby. So understanding what it is, finding resources. A lot of folks with different things here. So that's fantastic.
Okay.
Not bad.
Great.
All right, Laszlo, you are
we'll get back to the chat channel, but I have a feeling we'll be answering some of those questions in the upcoming stuff. So
I hope so. And if not, we will come back to it. I promise. And let's get back to it.
Yeah, and if we can't get to it, we will follow up afterwards. So Dave will capture the questions and we'll do a post-webinar follow-up with everyone as well as best as possible.
You betcha.
So in the meantime, then, Joe, you shared some fantastic information with us, but like anything else that we have to go through, there are challenges to this. What are some of the challenges that you've seen and have had to deal with?
Well, there's always tons of challenges, especially when you're talking about such a modernization effort across such a large footprint, if I would, of systems and infrastructure, et cetera, across our federal government agencies, right? So the challenges are implicit trust versus zero trust, right? A lot of people say, we'll get there. It's okay. We test as much as we can. Well, zero trust is absolute. You don't trust anybody, period. Okay. There's a lot of rebuilding and or replace with cloud directives, but the challenge I give you is that cloud does not equal zero trust. Zero trust has to be certified by GSA on what suppliers and clouds actually have zero trust for you before you can place your bet with any particular cloud supplier there. Will massive investments be required? Absolutely. And it's a challenge. As you said, where do I get the resources? And resources always start, we always say, I don't have the people to work on this, whatever. Hey, it always comes down to funding. And I know that. We all know that. And it's about, is there more money? Yes. There's at least directives that say we'll put more money in the pot to be shared across all the agencies. However, you got to go get to them. You got to justify them. You got to have a plan, and you'll also be required to reprioritize your existing budgets, right? It's all about bringing people up to speed on training and skills. And as I said, can you trust your suppliers? Now, when I talk about suppliers, it's just not cloud. All of your contractors, right? All of your software suppliers, all of your equipment suppliers, et cetera. Can you trust them? Are they up to speed? Okay. Is there a consensus on an individual target that says, just do this? No. Implement. Remember, we started with concepts, move to philosophy, embrace. How do you achieve the desired results for zero trust within your agency is dependent on your systems and your infrastructure and how you choose to go about that. So no, there is not a specific maturity model consensus, but we will get today to the reference architectures to use, okay? You're going to require a dedicated program office to track all of your activities against the modernization efforts as well as ZTA. It's all about portfolios of programs and projects. That doesn't go away. It has to be managed and tracked over a long period of time. And there's a matrix of agencies reporting requirements that come along with the executive order and the direction setting. So there's a significant amount of oversight being placed on this. The hardest part in major programs and projects is always about coordination and communications and keeping everything in sync. Software supply chains and cloud services, zero trust immaturity does exist today. That's why I say the challenge is, can you trust them? You have to ask. If you're running a flat network versus microsegmentation, there's an issue, right? You know, if you get farther into outside of the zero trust area, just into the modernization, talks about microsegmentation. The weakest link in any large network environment is totally flat networks. Now, flat networks were adopted over decades because they let ease of access. Well, once a flat network is penetrated, boom, they're everywhere. Lateral movement of a hack or ransomware or getting access to data just propagates in a flash, hence microsegmentation. And I'm going to say this is no more single sign-ons and staying signed on to your applications, your systems, your networks all day long for 12 hours a day while you go about your business. It's about session control, right? And then I'll leave the last one is always, hey, we live in a commercial world, the commercial world and the marketing world, claims versus reality. You gotta check everything. It's that simple.
Joe, this is a lot. Is there any good to be found in these challenges? Next slide.
We didn't want to say it was easy, all right, because it's not. But, you know, I've always believed, and I've learned along the way through people who taught me, things are never as good as, nor as bad as they first appear. It may seem overwhelming, but what, you know, it goes back to, how do you move a mountain? How do you move a mountain? One shovelful at a time. Once you build your strategy and you start working out your high-level plans, partitioning them, and then digging into the work one shovelful at a time, you move your way forward. So things truly are never as good as or as bad as they first appear.
Okay. Does zero trust stand alone, or are there linkages to other aspects of the federal modernization?
Well, zero trust has a dependence on having good governance policies and operations discipline to implement it and maintain it, and continuous monitoring, right? So are there dependencies? Yes. Yes. As is in the executive orders and the OMB guidance, and just common sense for IT professionals, right? You need to know your assets. You need to know your configurations. You have to maintain your patches, okay, patch management. And then a strict focus on user, process, and machine identity management. Now, notice I'm separating these things: user, process, and machine identity management. Now, while we didn't mention it earlier, identity includes process-to-process access, least privileged access of applications talking to each other, users, process, and machine identity access, equipment identity. And then user, process, and machine access management. Now, I separated the two here on purpose because many of the solutions you'll hear marketed or advertised today talk about identity and access management in the same breath. And the flow of managing identity is separate from using identity to control access, which is why I've outlined it here this way, and then segmentation of your networks.
Joe, as you said about a minute ago, all of this sounds complicated, and about as complicated as when you led the security for the Olympics.
Yeah. Yep.
Why don't you share a little bit about your experience of leading complex systems and change?
Well, hey, listen, as I said again, the challenge is there's so many moving parts you have to work at organizing and tracking and tracing everything you do. Okay. Now, yes, the Olympics had, it sort of like reminds me of how many moving parts there are. This is on the same scale. When you think of securing the Olympic Games, okay, and one of the ones that I managed was the Rio Olympics. Every country times every athletic agency within that country, all of the country Olympic committees, the overarching Global Olympic Committee, every supplier and vendor for buildings, access control, food services, lighting, every country's multiple TV stations, radio stations, podcasters, et cetera, access to information, infrastructure at the games itself for scoring, timing, et cetera, just ticketing and turnstiles, scheduling of rooms for visitors and athletes, managing their diets and their food requirements, et cetera. You tie all of those moving components together. This effort for modernizing the federal government infrastructure is pretty much on the same scale. So lots of moving parts, all about program and project management and having a plan, right? So you're modernizing the enterprise information and infrastructure. It's all about simplifying security architecture as a focus with consistent policies, data management, and non-person identities, as well as person identities. I mentioned that earlier, process and machine, non-person identities, as well as person identities. So DoD has led the vanguard on ZTA focuses on non-person identities and person identities, okay? And this is the source of the DoD's ZTA reference architecture. Move the slide, please.
Yeah, so Joe, do we actually have a reference architecture we can use?
Yep. Which leads us into the adoption of this with DHS and CISA of a reference architecture maturity model, which was mentioned in one of the questions, et cetera. Now, I'm not going to spend an hour here on this slide. It's here, it exists for you. If at any point in time you want to reach out to us and talk more deeply about this, feel free, just reach out to Shantanu and, it's easily done. But the focus on as a reference architecture, as well as the maturity stages of discovery, assessment, baseline, intermediate implementation and capabilities and controls and advanced exist. It's there for you to use. That work has been done to help guide you.
Next slide.
And more deeply, facing the challenge of concepts to reality, what's in the reference architecture goes much deeper. Okay. And again, we could spend an hour on this slide alone, I think, having a dialogue about what it means to you or your individual systems. But I'm sure focusing on this is unique to each of your agencies and your systems and your infrastructures, et cetera. But the core focuses in more details on automating your count, your master user records, client identity assurance, data-centric enterprise approaches, et cetera, and dynamic access control. Details on how to go about that in the reference architectures are there, and it's available for you.
So up front, we talked about at the core of Zero Trust is least privilege. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
How it works is focusing on allowing only enough access to perform a required task or job. Session access, once the session is done, you're out. Does it sound like it's going to be a real pain in everybody's rear end? Oh, I can't log on and stay logged on. I got to re-log on. Hey, yeah, that's part of the education process with your user base, but that's what it's about. Okay. Bare minimum privileges necessary to perform the task or function at the user, process, or machine level, and applied uniformly, okay, at every level of your systems, users, systems, processes, networks, databases, application, equipment, and devices.
So this sounds really complex, Joe.
All right, so everybody worries about complexity. Yes, it's complex, but again, things are never as good as nor as bad as. And if you're interested in talking about, hey, how do I get resources? What do I need, et cetera, complexity in communications, or just tasks to move everything around, et cetera, Yeah, it's complex, but I am sure, how many people here? There's 197 people on the webinar today. Okay. Out of that, I am sure many of you are familiar with the Project Management Institute, and you're already PMI certified, as are Laszlo and I. And if you are PMI certified, you've gone through the test. And if you don't recognize this algorithm, I'm going to reach out and revoke your PMI certification, because this is on the test about complexity in communications. Okay. Number of channels and moving parts or points for communications, n times n minus 1 divided by 2 gives you a relative score of complexity. Yes, it's complex, but that doesn't mean it cannot be managed.
So next slide, please. Joe, walk us through some of this.
So yes, portfolios of portfolios and programs and projects. Notice I mentioned portfolios of portfolios. That's because the coordination requirements across all of your agencies and with DHS and CISA, et cetera, right? You guys have tons of work going on in your organizations from an IT perspective. And, you know, this executive order has got so many moving parts to it. ZTA is only one, and I understand that. However, the requirements to help control that or the guidance and methodologies already exist with OMB 53 and 300. Next slide, please. Your approaches to portfolio and project management are there. These are just examples from my professional support of other federal agencies over my career. Okay, utilizing your approach, project investment summaries, reporting, earned value management, the questions to ask and answer and report to OMB, they're all there. The management guidance exists. Next slide, please. And questions come up about funding all over the place. Well, this is always astounding to me because it's amazing how much money goes into billions and billions that go into our IT for our federal government and running our country. This is directly off the itdashboard.gov. It shows a progression of budget levels across all agencies. This is just, I just picked this up off the dashboard. From 2011 to 2022, you can see that we're approaching $100 billion. There are moderate rates of increase along the way. So money is there. Now, if you go on the dashboard, I know I can look up just as well as you can. Every agency's budget is there and it's published and it's available to everyone to see what agency has what funding. And what I was amazed when I looked at this was how little funding in some agencies and how massive funding in agencies. I don't understand the inequities, but I think it's about who's actually going after the funds and the money and directly associated with the size of your IT infrastructure and footprint and systems footprint. There's money there. Under the executive order, there's a directive to add more funds for cybersecurity, but that doesn't mean there's another massive 100 billion pot to be shared by all of the agencies just for modernization. There is a directive to report to OMB reprioritization of fundings to achieve these goals. That's just part of life. Okay.
Okay. So Joe, let's take a little bit of a pivot. And what about the other federal and IT cybersecurity guidance that's out there?
So these questions came up. People asked about fit and tick. They still apply, right? Trusted Internet Connection Policy, GSA's furniture information program, and how you can go get your equipment. It still applies. Next slide. It's not worth, I don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time here today. I'd rather get to your real questions, right? It's the IT portion of the FIT program. There it is. The guidance is there. What's covered on access and access points, so on and so forth. Yep, still use it. Trusted internet connections and TIC, guidance and repositories, how to get to that. Yes, now overlay ZTA on top of that. Okay. How to do that, it's still applicable.
Yeah. So let's go to key takeaways and then we'll take questions.
Hey, listen, the key takeaways obviously are it's a challenge. There's a lot to do. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. ZTA is the critical component of protecting our infrastructures. No doubt. Okay. And zero trust adoption will be unique to each of your agencies, and that's specific to your systems and your assets and your footprint. It's that simple.
Next slide.
Where do you go from here? Hey, general guidance is obviously establish what scope you're going to undertake, structure out your approach to portfolios, programs, projects, and budgets. What vendors, understand your vendors and all your CMDB and all of the assets you're looking to protect at the user level, the process level, and the equipment level. Develop your strategy and then start marching forward towards adoption. Now, in today's webinar, that may seem like a trite statement from me. I understand how much work, we understand how much work goes behind this, but this is really the basics. It's the approach to undertaking any program or project approach to changing information systems.
All right, guys. Well, that was a ton of information. Great framework, by the way, laying the foundation. So continuing the conversation, we want to make sure that you get everything that you need in order to be able to do this. And we'll talk, we got questions, a bunch of questions coming. So if you'd like to continue the conversation with Joe and Laszlo, goes through Shantanu, we'll help connect that there, and we'll make sure that you get what you need. If you want to discuss it within your agency, or if you want to discuss something else, that's fine. We want to make sure that, and let us know your urgency level, and we'll make sure you get what you need, right, gents? And so we got a ton of stuff here. So I'm going to go to the Q&A first. So David, again, from NIST SP 800 to 207, architecture approaches, seeing enhanced identity governance using microsegmentation, using network infrastructure and software-defined parameters. Love all those. And any thoughts on using one or a combination or of those approaches? So
wow,
that's a big one.
That's a big one. And I'm not going to punt, but what I'm going to say, it's a little bit more of a conversation to say, I have no insights into where you are, your agency, your footprint, your systems, your infrastructures, your asset base, number of users, your connection points with outside users, whether or not they're part of the government itself or other countries or other militaries or what have you. That, to answer you fully would require a better understanding of where you're sitting. But yes, they all apply. And that's part of the strategy formulation of what pieces work for you. And
David,
the thing I would add to that Joe said, absolutely, but follow the data. Follow the chain from the minute that you have that piece of data that you've classified, follow the data through your systems, through your people, through your organization, through your processes. And wherever that data is, you're trying to protect that data. So all of these apply.
So David goes on to ask, is there a short list of core capabilities that are required to be implemented in order to stand up the foundational ZTA prioritization? And I think a lot of that, you guys went through some of those pieces, but as it applies to David, how would you recommend that? I think you guys could get together and do a Vulcan mind meld because you're on the same page of what's necessary. Anybody want to take that one?
Let me make a comment. I saw on the chat window, somebody tried the link for the OMB, the IT dashboard, and it didn't work for them. I just used the link and it redirected me to vismanagementfcagsa.gov. I just put it in the chat window. Okay.
I think they don't trust you.
Hey, test everything.
All right. Christopher's asking, do we have a gauge on what tools some agencies have selected to meet various pillars, e.g. Zscaler versus Prisma Access, Splunk, CrowdStrike versus MSMDE, et cetera? What are agencies considering for the data platform? Great question, Christopher.
It's a great question, but I have no insight into what other agencies are doing at this point in time.
And it really depends on what the requirements are for each.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to, somewhere along the way, I'm sure I'll wind up doing a survey. But I can't answer that directly today. Thank you.
All right, Linda said that was a great pick of the ocean with the sailboat.
Yep,
that's the first thing. Slides, you're going to get that. Yay, go PMI, Tom says. And session docs will be provided afterwards. We make sure you get those links. Hang on a sec. I'm going through the chat right now, so just bear with me. What can federal contractors do / focus on to assist the federal government to meet their goals in zero trust? Great question, Nicole. Keep bringing the good information, I think, is one thing. Wouldn't you say, Joe?
Well, I would tell anyone who's out there in an organization that's as a supplier to the federal government is the first place you start is you adopt all the principles of the executive order for your own company first. Do it for yourselves first before you offer changing somebody else in the federal government.
Gotcha.
You're going to be part of that third-party risk assessment when it comes down the road.
Yep.
And Thomas Murphy, is that Thomas Murphy from VBA? If it is, good to see you, man. It's been a while. Okay, so there's a bunch of folks that have answered the poll. I think I got through all of those there. Is there any other questions before we jump in? I got a couple that were lingering from the past that we can take a look at. And do you cover these? Zero trust architecture is a subset of zero trust. Does zero trust include, it's hard for me to read this one. It's coming in. Does zero trust include specific security requirements that we should include in our future network and end user device procurements?
Yep.
And
again, when you start talking about device procurement, GSA has the responsibility to update the guidance on what equipment suppliers and vendors, et cetera, will meet the requirements of the executive order.
Yep.
And keep in mind what Joe has repeatedly said throughout this presentation. It goes back to the core least privilege principle that for each device, that is, the device itself needs to be authenticated, for each user needs to be authenticated, and that they're allowed to use that device to each session. So whatever is architected, whatever systems you have to have in place, it's around beginning with that and then building out around the other core principles.
And it sounds, overwhelming. Please, I'm holding my eyes because I'm going, oh God. Okay, It sounds overwhelming. Listen, in your infrastructures, I am pretty sure you're already doing equipment to equipment, process to process authentication. Okay, because that's how you establish the links when the systems start up, et cetera. I know it's embedded in there. Okay, however, it's the implementation of zero trust, and once the session is over, shutting off the access instead of leaving it running 24 hours a day. Okay, so it's not like you're starting from scratch.
So I think we got most of these guys. Current timeline for implementation, OMB funding. There's a lot of that we don't know quite yet, but it is being mandated by Congress as well. So that certainly helps, right? Organizations' approach to implementing, we talked about that. Federal agencies implemented challenges and lessons learned. We didn't get a whole lot of those, but if there's some dialogue that can happen here of other folks, that'd be great. How ZTA implemented, impact on users and cost. And I have a couple other ones here. Give insight in the plans of what was done to mitigate risks found. Also identify risks and issues. And they're looking for OMB feedback. I don't know that we have that yet from Margaret from the VA.
No, I'd have to look at the risk stuff separately. We didn't focus on that in preparation for this webinar. But happy to follow up, please, with anybody. I'd like to go back, if I may, Dave, quickly. There was a point of please address, or one of the questions early on. I took a note. One was global presence. We're not connected to an embassy. The requirements are the same. There's nothing to change anything about implementing ZTA, et cetera, because you're connected or not connected to an agency, or if you're connected to another government systems or another military or another supplier in another country or anything else. It's about session control. It's about user identity, access management, and controlling the sessions for users, process, and machine connections. If you implement them and you test and validate the righteousness of that access request, no matter where it comes from in the world or across another network or boundary, then you're meeting the guidance for ZTA. Okay.
Love it. And Charles from BLS, how zero trust impacts Windows authentication, if at all?
Windows at the machine level or Windows to Windows and servers, two different conversations. Okay. So it's a very interesting question. I don't know that it addresses you authenticating yourself directly to Windows at your keyboard level. But pretty much, I would think you guys are doing the same thing we're doing in the commercial world, right? The first thing you authenticate is, do you have the right, okay, to spin up your disk drive, because your disk drive is encrypted. So pretty much the first thing that happens is you have to decrypt, you have to put in an authentication or a PIN or a card or something to say, hey, I have the right to access this laptop. Okay. You're authenticating your access and identity through that mechanism. You spin up, and then you have to log into Windows. Once you log into Windows, now I'm going beyond the Windows question, then you have to authenticate to your network. So you have 3 levels of access controls already for most implementations. Okay. At least that's the way I used to do it in all the organizations I've been a part of. And you're stepping up in there. So there is a check, right? When you power off in the commercial world for decades, I've always had the requirement to log off, right? Stop the session. Now, how can this be dealt with Windows? We'll see if Microsoft helps with that or they don't, but it's a timing thing to log you off the session automatically and shut the machine down is a simple way of doing that. The other way, we used to have token cards we handed out to every employee. They couldn't even log into their machine unless you put the token card in. Now, one of the educational challenges you're going to run into all the time is, okay, I got my token card. I put in my card, boom, I can log in. I'm on the network. And then somebody gets up and walks away from their laptop to go to lunch.
No, that never happens, Joe.
So as the chief security officer for Atos, I'd go to headquarters in Paris. And I mean, if you know Atos or you don't know Atos, it's kind of funny. It's the 3rd largest outsourcing firm in the world. We manage all the Olympics in Salt Lake City, blah, 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 blah. I can go on and on about the things that we did, but I would go to headquarters in Paris and wander around our 4 buildings at lunchtime. And I'd walk around the workstations because we had open floor plans, et cetera. And wherever I found a laptop with a token card in it, I pulled them out. And I'd collect them in a bag. And then I'd wait to get the phone calls that would eventually trickle to me. I remember I was the senior vice president and chief security officer. So sooner or later, they'd filter through their own management teams, et cetera, to say, hey, IT, my machine's dead. I can't access it. And then every person who left a token card in their machine would have to come see me personally and get a lecture before they'd get their card back about security. Okay, a lecture on security.
There you go.
So there's lots of ways to do it. This is why it's concepts. It's concepts and philosophies and how you do it. Think about it. I would suggest that, if you sit back and think about your challenges to implementing this, you may find some simpler ways to achieve the desired end result as opposed to more complex ways.
I love it. Awesome. Brian says, how come you use 5 pillars and I've seen 7 pillars and other instructions or policies? So you're apparently, for Brian, you're 2 pillars short.
Well, I don't know if I'm 2 pillars short or not. That's just what I focused on. So there you go.
Yeah, let me address that, because if you do a little bit, on you will find some, I would say, some people add users, communication, orchestration, and the things that are more implementation specific in nature. If we go to the bottom of the White House memo and the executive order, the taxonomy of zero trust architecture is on very much these 5 pillars.
Those 5, yes, absolutely. And that is key. This was a lecture or a webinar on ZTA, not everything in the executive order.
Nope. And if you have any additional questions, shoot them over to Shantanu. We'll also have the ability to follow up after this, because guess what you're going to get? You're going to get a recap email by the end of the day. It'll have the presentation, all the links to the session docs, link to this video right here. And if you want to continue the conversation, there's a link to reach out to Shantanu to continue the dialogue, because that's what it's all about. And we're a couple minutes behind, but I tell you what, guys, that was fantastic. Great information, very deep. Really appreciate you, Joe and Laszlo. Great job of handling the whole thing.
And please, anybody who wants to reach out to just, hey, ask a question, a further question, or what have you, to either myself or to Laszlo, Shantanu's email is there just so that you don't have 5 emails to respond to or reach out to. That's all it is. So please feel free. We love talking to people. Our networking connections around the world are quite large. The world's a lot smaller than you think it is. So it was our pleasure to be here today.
That was awesome.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, great job, guys. Again, you can reach out directly to Joe, direct to Laszlo, reach out to Shantanu. Shantanu will be responsible for coordinating within your team if you want to continue the conversation. Anybody that responded to that poll that said they'd do that, that's the first step that's going to happen. So you can expect that to happen very shortly. And again, great job, gentlemen, and helping to solve the problems, certainly for each of us to deal with the security issues that we have and the bad actors in the world. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Laszlo.